My name is David Clemons. I come to these conferences. I've been coming here for ever since the first one, about 9 years ago. These conferences are for educators that they learn a lot here when they come. And you know, the thing is, I wish that when I was in school that I had teachers that would put that much emphasis on learning how to help me, as these teachers are coming here to learn how to help their students. So my story starts off in a little town in South Carolina called Westminster. Geographically, it's 18 miles southwest of Clemson, which houses Clemson University. Growing up in South Carolina, I came from a family of non-readers. I'm the youngest of 6. My mom couldn't read. I had the sisters and brothers. They all left home at an early age because being in the South, there weren't much work. So you left home in those days to find work from big cities. So I found myself in school at a very early age, and my school was only 2 doors from my house. And it's, being a small town, everybody knew everybody. The teachers there loved me, you know, and I actually was in school before I was old enough to actually start. That's how I was babysitted. I was babysitted because I had 2 sisters there. I would go from one room to another wherever my sisters were, and that was allowed back then. And the teachers, Miss Poole and Miss Chillis, loved me to death. Miss Chillis, she would pinch my cheek so hard sometimes it would make me cry almost, but she was a lovely lady. And so, coming along, I got old enough to get to the 1st grade. I was old enough, and I was in the 1st grade, and thought I was learning like everybody else were, but not quite as well. And I get to the 2nd grade, and I move on, and I get to the 3rd grade, and I move on, and I get to the 3rd grade, and I stop. I stayed back a year, and then they moved me to the 4th grade. I stayed back a year, and got to the 5th grade, stayed back a year. And during those times when I was in school, to make up for my inability to keep up with my classmates, I did a lot of stupid things and I stayed in trouble. And we had corporal punishment. And trust me, I was in my principal's office a lot getting corporal punished. And so by the time I got to the 6th grade and weren't learning still, and my mom suggested that I should move to Washington with my brothers and go to school there so I could learn to read. So, and that's what we did. At the age of, I was 15. And so I was brought to Washington, D.C. to go to school. And my brother, God bless his soul, took me to an elementary school. And I'm walking down the hall and seeing all these little bitty kids around me, and I'm saying, I shouldn't be here. But at that time, if they would have taught me how to read, I wouldn't have mind being there with those little kids because that's how bad I wanted to learn to read. So we get to the principal office, and he said, oh, no, he's too old to be in this school. You need to send him down the street to Taft Junior High. And so that's what we did. Went down, I got enrolled there, and they put me in special ed. Now, special ed back then, they didn't do what they do now, or maybe they still do some of this now, I'm not exactly sure. But the first thing they did was put me into a home economic class, wood shop class, and a typing class. No reading classes at all. So here I am trying to type and can't spell. And so the teachers that was in the special ed room took very little time with us. Actually, what I remember her doing most of all is reading magazines and books while we were just mingling around and out in front of her. So still, I didn't get in too much trouble, but I wound up getting into some that was a big problem. I wound up getting stabbed because I sort of got into a gang, and so once I got stabbed, then there was a lot of fighting going on, and behind that one fight, and the police found out that I was actually from South Carolina, that my parents was there. They told my brother for his safety, his family's safety, it would be best for me to move back to South Carolina. I was 16 at that time, and I never went back to school. Years later, I came back to Washington to find work. I was living with my brother. I got a job working with the guy living next door to me. He was a carpet installer, and so I went to work as an apprentice. I'm a very quick learner. My mom made sure that we was good workers, because if you got a job and you can't read, you had to be a good employer, because the person that could read will beat you out every time just because they could. So anyhow, I learned a trade, eventually wound up getting married, and shortly after getting married, I wound up having back problems, and I couldn't do the work that I've been doing. And the doctor says I need to find some other type of employment. Not knowing how to read, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was married. My wife didn't even know the severity of my illiteracy. I never really talked to her. I always told her when it came down to filling out forms or whatever, I said, well, I have an 8th grade education, and you finish high school, you fill out the papers, you understand it better. I always had an excuse. So working with the lady at Workers' Compensation, I was told that I'll get a job paying as much as I was making as an installer. But I know that wasn't true, because I one time had my own business, and at the height of my business, I had 8 people working for me. I was making plenty of money hand over fist, and so much I didn't know what to do with it, but my wife did. She knew exactly what to do. So, but anyhow, after we separated, and the back surgeries and stuff, trying to find a job that I can do. My workers' compensation lady that was working with me will send me to places to fill out job applications. And I would tell her, I can't read or write to do this. She said, well, we need to get you an adult literacy program. And I'm thinking, an adult literacy program. I went to school until I was 16. And when I left school, I didn't even know all of my family members' names. I knew my sister named Sarah Louise. I knew my mother's name, Maggie Clemons, but I didn't know Robert Lee, John Edward, and I did have a sister named Hattie Mae, but I never saw her name in print enough to identify it, because she left home when I was very, very young. And then there's John Henry. So that's my family, and I didn't know those names when I saw them on paper. So anyhow, I go to the lady at Workers' Comp suggests that I go to a literacy program, and it was 2 that she pulled out. One was the YWCA, and the other was the Washington, at that time, Washington Literacy Council, but it's called Washington Literacy Center now. So anyhow, I called the YWCA, and they said, I called a literacy council, and they said, well, we'll get back with you within a couple of weeks. So a couple of weeks go by, didn't hear from them. So I said, well, I had second option. I go to the YWCA, and they said, well, look, you bring in some books or magazines or something that you want to read, and we'll start with that. And I'm saying, well, that material sounds like it's for somebody that know how to read at least some. I can't read it all. So I weren't comfortable with that. So I called the Literacy Council back. They apologized and had me to come back in. They gave me they tested to see where I was at. And so they said, well, we're going to start you off with Challenger 1 or something other. Anyhow, and they also told me, I told them that I wanted to learn how to fill out a job application. They said, well, we'll teach you how to read, and write, and you can do whatever you want to do with that. So in the beginning, I started working with the Lawbot method, and I thought I was learning pretty much how to read for the first few months, and I got to the point that I felt like I wasn't learning anymore. Well, that's because I am dyslexic, and part of my dyslexia, thanks to this lady named Linda Farrell, is part of my dyslexia is short-term memory loss. She taught me that. So anyhow, I was on the verge of leaving the program because it just wasn't working for me. It was just filling me with frustration. So we had started, some people there at the literacy program had started a pre-GED class. And they was asking people, students that attended the Literacy Council, did they want to come to the pre-GED class on Saturdays, which I think was every other Saturday. And so when they asked me, I said, GED? I said, you crazy? I can't even hardly read. They said, well, no, you don't have to read. If you can't read it, you could always pass it to somebody else. You know, if you don't want to read, you could pass it on. I said, well, okay, maybe I'll come because I'm good at passing stuff on. So gets to the pre-GED class and actually learning some things, you know, not learning how to read it, but learning stuff that you would need to know if you were going to high school or something like that, geographic stuff, history and stuff like that. So I liked the class. So, and also Sandra, a friend of mine that was in the class, and I noticed that when I first started, her and I was reading about the same. And I'm saying, well, this is okay. I can hang in this class and get, you know, as I get better, as I learn more, I get better at reading. So then I noticed Sandra has started reading much better than I. And then Linda asked me to, she said, well, I'm working with Sandra on something. Maybe you and your tutor could learn this and work with you on it. So and that's what she did. She brought us down to her office, which was downtown DC. And she taught my tutor how to teach me this Wilson method of learning. And Linda gave me the first few lessons as my tutor was on the side learning. And that was the hardest thing that I ever done. I never knew that letters stood for sound. And Linda was teaching me the sounds of the letters. And my God, she had my mouth moving in ways that never moved before. I mean, literally, my lips would get tired and my tongue would be tired from pronouncing these sounds like ah, and you have to say them correctly, or else, you know, if you won't be able to spell if you can't say the sounds correctly because you don't know is it right or wrong. So that was very hard. One day, one of the lessons was so hard till I really almost passed out, I felt like. But anyhow, that's what opened the door for me. That's what taught me, said to me, you can do this. Enough practice, long enough, you could learn to read. And so I went on to the Literacy Council. They wound up making up a job for me. I'd done some volunteer stuff for them. They made up a job, full-time job, as student support coordinator. And I kept that job until I would wind up getting sick and I had to retire. But mainly what I want to get across to providers, literacy providers, is that we depend on you all to give us what we need. I don't care how you do it. There's always a way.